Welcome to the weekday edition of Vogan's European Outlook. Hope everybody is safe and well wherever you are today. Enjoying the sunshine. It certainly feels like summer out there, but it may be a big change coming as we move into the weekend and into next week in particular. We may go from summer to deep autumn lows once again. So we'll look at that in just a second here. But before we continue with the video, if you're enjoying the content here in the channel, please hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already done so. This is the current satellite imagery looking over the continent of Europe at the moment, and you can see where the high pressure is. It's pretty much bang slap over the UK, Ireland, North Sea, extending into the Denmark, Norway area as well. Got some showers and thunderstorms over the Mediterranean basin at the moment. We've also got some very smoky air associated with a lot of wildfires going on at the moment across parts of Portugal. If we zoom into the latest radar imagery here, or satellite, should I say, you can see the very smoky conditions extending from Portugal. Generally here, you can actually see the fires on this imagery here in the northern side of Portugal in particular. And with winds blowing out of the east, we're seeing this smoke getting blown out over the Atlantic here. And we zoom back out, you can see that smoke quite clearly getting wafted out over the open Atlantic. Over the UK, we've got very little cloud cover to speak about at the moment. Beautiful day for sure, and this is probably the most sustained, decent weather for the UK as a whole in several months here. If we look at the meteoscale pressure chart here, this is the current situation. So we've got this very powerful area high pressure at around 1036 millibars, so not too shabby at all, sitting over the northern UK. And you can see here lower heights across the south, where we're seeing the showers and thunderstorms continuing to blow up. More flash flooding in parts of Italy, for example, and adjacent areas. So the ongoing flood situation remains across the far south of the continent. Looking at precipitation over the last 24 hours, underneath that high, we've literally no rain to speak about. So it's been a very dry past 24 hours across the majority of Europe. In fact, once you get away from parts of the south, a few spots in central areas, but generally speaking, there is a heck of a lot of zeros on that chart for the last 24 hours or so. Looking at the 48-hour, and you can see here a little bit of wetter conditions across central and southern areas of the continent here. Very little in the way of rain, again, across much of France, much of Iberia, UK, Ireland, across northern Germany and Poland, most of Poland dry at the moment here, which is certainly good news for folks, especially in southern Poland, where they are continuing the cleanup effort after the weekend deluge. And then this is the 72-hour rainfall totals here of meteoscale here. We've had some very significant amounts of rainfall, especially up across northeastern Turkey. Some areas picking up close to 300 millimeters of rain. In fact, a few spots in the very far northeast corner, talking about in excess of 300 millimeters of rain over the last 24 hours or so. Looking at temperature, these are the current temperatures at the time of recording. So we do have a fairly warm day across the majority of the continent at the moment. We've also got a very warm day across particularly the northern UK, something we have not seen much of in recent months. But I think we did have a 25 up at the Altnahara. Temperatures pegged slightly back to 24.3. My nearest stations of Loch Liscarnock 23, 18 at 10. Temperature here at the house 24.4. You have to go all the way back to May, the last time my particular site recorded as warm of a temperature. So no day in June, July or August was as warm as what we've got today. So it's feeling like summer for sure. We've also got some warmth to speak about. Upper teens to around 20 in central areas of the UK. The Central Belt, for example, 23.2 at Glasgow Bishopton, 22 at Glasgow Airport. Upper teens to around the 20 mark across northern and central areas of England. Then as you get down further south, you've got 24.3 at St James's Park. We've got Northolt at 24 also. Moving across to Ireland, we've also got upper teens to low 20s across the board here. So a very, very pleasant day for sure. And to be honest with you, the high that we've got over the UK at the moment is the most anomalous upper level positives anywhere on the planet at the moment here. So this is the strongest high anywhere compared to average anyway, not just in the Northern Hemisphere, but globally. We'll get to that in just a second here because I want to talk a little bit about the atmospheric dynamics and why the temperatures, even under clear skies and light winds last night, big, strong, bright moon, temperatures were struggling to drop last night. And yet, a week ago, we had the same conditions. Temperatures were the coldest in early September since the 1980s in a few spots. So I want to talk a little bit about the thickness values and the reasons behind why we can have the same conditions deliver a very different temperature outcome. This was a capture here, a satellite capture of the major wildfires going on in northern Portugal. This was a tweet here by Pierre Marcus showing multiple fires and smoke plumes in Portugal, September the 17th, according to the Copernicus Sentinel-3. So very, very nasty situation ongoing here. And then this is a video here that was shared by Volcanic on Twitter, showing the seriousness of this fire situation here at the moment. Very, very, very scary situation ongoing at the moment here. So we've got the floods on one end of the continent. We've got the major wildfires to speak about on the opposite side of the continent here. So this is an ongoing situation across Portugal, northern Portugal to be exact. Like I said, the high that we've got at the moment here is among the strongest compared to average anywhere in the northern hemisphere, but also across the planet. This was a capture that I took off the GFS extended model yesterday, showing the very strong positive bank slap over the northern UK. And obviously the troughiness underneath has been creating the heavy flood situation here. Moving across to the other side of the Atlantic, we've got that trapped area of low pressure here. Remnants of Francine also stuck underneath that similar block. It's a kind of mirror image here, both sides of the Atlantic. Strong block and highs, trapped areas of low pressure underneath, and with those features becoming trapped, drawing in tropical moisture off abnormally warm sea surface temperatures, both in the Mediterranean and both over the Western Atlantic, is fueling these extreme rainfall events. That is something that I alluded to in yesterday's video, obviously. And then if you look at Europe up close, we've got the bullseye of the anomalous heights across the northern UK, extending up towards the Northern Isles here. So that is a very impressive area of low pressure for sure. And you can see here, this is the 591 height line over the UK. That's a very powerful high, by the way. You don't often see that here over this part of the world. But I want to look at the mean sea level pressure and precipitation, because what we've got is essentially, let's zoom in a little bit so you can actually see this a little bit clearer. I hope you can see this. But we've essentially got what is known as the 564 thickness line encompassing the UK, or the majority of the UK at the moment here. What does this actually mean? It means that the thickness of the troposphere is much greater when you've got greater thicknesses. The lower the thickness value, remember last week we were boasting 534 thickness values. Once you start getting to 534, 528, that is when you start to look at the probability of rain changing over to snow. Once you get to 564 thicknesses, which is essentially marking the depth of the column, the greater the depth of the troposphere, the warmer the column tends to be, and the 564 line tends to be of tropical origin air. So we've actually essentially got a tropical air mass over particularly the northern UK at the moment here. If we look at the 850s here, let's go to this tweet here in particular. I want to show you this. And essentially we had the 536 height line last week, and now we have the 564 height line. So 536 is essentially polar air. when you've got the 564 height line, we've got tropical air in place. And you can see the setup that is promoting this at the moment. Big strong area of high pressure at 1035 millibars over Denmark at the moment here. Then we've got the 564 line. And then this is the 850 temperature. So we've got some very warm air, generally at about 10 to 15 Celsius over particularly the northern UK at the moment here. That's where the 564 line is. And essentially this is suggesting that we've got a thicker troposphere. It takes longer to reach the boundary layer between the troposphere and the stratosphere when you've got a warmer air mass in place. When you've got a polar air mass, the column shrinks and the boundary layer actually gets closer to the surface the colder the air mass is. I hope this is explaining it. I'm trying my best to do it. Sometimes I'm even trying to understand atmospheric physics myself. But these were the temperatures back at 3:50 UTC this morning. You can see here temperatures, yep, we've got some upper single figures across the northern UK, but down across the southeast, under the clear skies and light winds, we'll have temperatures of 14 to 16 Celsius over East Anglia. We've also got temperatures 10, 12, 13 Celsius under the same clear skies and light winds across the north. Back last week, we were seeing temperatures below the freezing mark, but it's because the column was much shallower with a lot more colder air in place, so therefore the radiational cooling effect, releasing heat from the surface up into space, was much more efficient. When you've got this kind of layer, this blanket of warm air within the column, the temperatures do not radiate that cooling, radiate that heat back to the atmosphere. And it was just something that I wanted to kind of share with you in today's video. The differences in air masses, the thicknesses of 564, which is a tropical air mass, versus what we had last week, 536. The column was much shallower, we had much colder air in place. So it just shows you the warmer the air mass, the thicker the value is, the greater the column actually is. The depth of the column becomes greater the warmer the air mass itself. So this is a relatively rare air mass, especially for the month of September, and especially given we don't have a Spanish plume. You typically would expect to see a 564 thickness over the UK, that the depth of warm air within the atmosphere, generally when you've got a Spanish plume or during the middle portions of summer. So this is a relatively rare occurrence. And what this is testament of is essentially the amount of warmth within the mid-latitude pattern at the moment here that is going to take time to dissipate. We're seeing these fluctuations. We're seeing the high over the Arctic. We're seeing it over the North Atlantic and Greenland. We're seeing the discharge of cold air. But at this time of the year, given the fact that we have just came off the hottest summer on record for Europe and across many parts of the Northern Hemisphere, this heat is still within the atmosphere. And when you've got the right dynamics in place, highs, lows, ridges, troughs, you can displace some of this warmth up further north compared to what you would typically expect to see. So I hope that explains a little bit, but I basically say in the tweet, clear sky and light wind last week produced the coldest early September night since the 80s. Tonight, those same conditions have quite a different feel. The reason, thicknesses are currently at 564, meaning we have a tropical air mass within a 1033 millibar high. Now remember, this high is the strongest since winter. In fact, here at the house, recorded 1033 millibars late last night. You have to go back to January, the last time I experienced a high that strong here at the house. So that 564 dam versus a 1033 millibar high is certainly quite a unique area of high pressure for the time of the year, and really for any time of the year. And this was versus the 1036 dam polar air within the trough last week. So quite conflicting back and forths that are going on with this pattern. This has been quite an extreme overall month of September for sure. Looking at the GFS ensemble, this is the jet stream level here. I want to show you a couple of interesting changes that are taking place. Then we'll go in briefly to next week. Hopefully tomorrow, I'm going to talk a little bit about the polar vortex, the weakness of the polar vortex, Also, the MJO rotating into colder phases and the prospects of something colder coming down towards the end of the month and beginning of October. That's coming up tomorrow. If you haven't already done so, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss tomorrow's video if you're interested in the polar vortex and all things winter. Look at this here. I want to show you, draw your attention to the strengthening of the jet stream off Asia out over the Pacific. And notice here the more flatter version of this. Instead of it being quite wavy, we've had a lot of lows coming out of the Barents Sea, dropping into the Aleutians, deepening troughs into the western United States. That has been forcing heights to build over Hudson Bay, over the Baffin Straits, over Greenland. That's been promoting that negative NAO pattern, by the way. And if we look at the NAO, it's expected to go from currently neutral to quite deeply negative here. So we've got another plunge, even deeper than the last one. So we're going to touch on this tomorrow, but we're expecting to see as much as, what would this be here, 2 sigma below the neutral line of the NAO. Looking at the Arctic oscillation, you can see here that it is going into the tank. So that means we're building pressure over the Arctic, allowing colder air to get released into the mid latitudes. We're going into the tank, but it's expected to actually go slightly positive towards the end of the month here. So we'll keep an eye on these oscillations going forward here. The MJO, something that we're keeping a close eye on as well. You can see that it continues to rotate into the more blocky phases of 7, 8, and 1. So things are coming together quite nicely here. Even if we don't have a bona fide polar outbreak early portions of October, it's what the pattern's telling us, I think, that's more important. And that's been something that I've been driving home the point. I looked at this last year. It worked out quite well. MJO, weak polar vortex, possibly cold December. Yeah, it's still early, and there are still a lot of things that can chop and change. But the general ideas are looking quite interesting, to say, to be honest with you. But you can see here the strengthening of the jet here, exiting Eastern Asia, so the northern side of Japan. We've got a strong jet core exiting. This is kind of known as an extended jet. And what is going to happen, I'm going to have to actually zoom back out here because I can't get to the arrows here. So yeah, watch this jet here as it strengthens and becomes quite zonal over the North Pacific. We're seeing these changes taking place. Watch what happens over the Atlantic. We've got a little bit of a mirror image here of the Pacific showing up in the Atlantic. We're starting to strengthen the jet here, and that is going to mark change as we move into the weekend and into particularly next week. The change taking place over the Pacific has that downstream effect over North America and then into the Atlantic basin. Remember, we're going from higher pressure at the moment here, so let's skip back. And you can see here the jet well to the north, a branch to the south. We've got this split flow to the west over the UK, over the Atlantic, sorry, well out to the west of the UK and Ireland. We've got one branch going north, one branch going south. We've got this big damming of high pressure over the UK and Ireland. But it's as these changes start to take place, and this creates a ripple effect, we start to see the changes showing up over the Atlantic basin. We're starting to see a stronger jet starting to appear to the east-southeast of Newfoundland here. And then as we progress into the early and middle portions of next week, notice the big change now. We've got high to the south, low to the north. That is a big change from what we've got at the moment here. And it's part of the eastward progression of the MJO. The changes that are then reflecting in the upper level North Pacific, as we see that pulse of convection move eastwards over the Pacific, we're seeing the changes showing up to the north here, and that is then having a downstream effect on the Atlantic and into Europe here. So let's look at Europe, and we'll have a look at the GFS chart here. So this is off weather charts. This is the here and now. High pressure to the north, low pressure to the south. Watch what happens as we play through the loop here. You notice here that the high starts to lift northwards. We're starting to see heights lower over northern France. Thunderstorms developing here. This is a Friday 18 UTC. And then as the heights start to lower over the UK and Ireland, that allows this area of thunderstorms and developing low pressure, weak at that, to then start to drift northwards. All the while, remember what's happening over the Atlantic. We're starting to see the jet become a little bit stronger over the western side of the Atlantic. And it's all starting to change. You can see here this area of low pressure over the central North Atlantic here. There's systems now starting to develop. There's low pressure now starting to replace that high pressure that we've got at the moment over the UK and Ireland. And as we move into Monday next week, you can see the lows gathering, the jet strengthening, the high then getting displaced to the south. And then we're starting to open the door to lower pressure and a much more cyclonic Atlantic-driven situation. Look at this here. Wednesday of next week. This is one model run off the GFS. There's hundreds out there. We know there's going to be changes. But look at this here. We've got a 972 millibar low, 970, 969 over the northwest UK by the time we reach the middle portions of next week. So about a week from now, we go from this 1033, 1032 millibars to this a 969 millibar low. Let's have a look and see what the pressure anomaly difference is. So this is next Thursday, Wednesday, as we move into Thursday next week. Look at the heights at the sea level pressure and look at what we've got at the moment here. And that is due to the MJO moving east, the change in the Pacific pattern, then over North America, over the Atlantic and into the UK and Ireland. So this is showing you the evolution, the change that takes place. But beyond that, it's complex. But my hunch would be that we've got opportunities for some of these lows to start drifting southwards. Let's have a look at the 850 temperature profile here. Warmer at the moment over the UK and Ireland here. That will drift its way out of the pattern as we move towards the Friday into Saturday period here. Notice here we're starting to cool the layer at 850 ever so slightly. We're starting to lose that 10 Celsius isotherm. Then as we continue to play through the loop, you see the gradient over the western side of the Atlantic tightening up. As that gradient tightens up, the jet stream strengthens in response to that. Then we've got cyclogenesis then drifting its way eastwards across the North Atlantic. Look at the contrast in temperature here between just to the south of Iceland and just to the north of the Azores. We've got this gradient here. We've got two areas of low pressure actually competing with one another. That feature there, by the way, may be the remnants of Gordon. I noticed the remnants is actually expected to drift north. And that's actually what's going to help increase the gradient, increase the change in the pattern, and becoming much more Atlantic driven once again. It's actually going to be the heat that was associated with Gordon over the central Atlantic drifting north. Then it collides with cold air over the North Atlantic and Bob's your uncle. So look at this here. By the time we reach 6 UTC next Thursday, we've got the jet stream strong. We've got low pressures coming in. Back comes autumn. And then we see the plunge of Arctic air flirting with the UK and Ireland here. It may have a couple of goes at it. Tries to come south, incoming area of low pressure. Then kind of pushes that cold to the north. That feature then moves through, it opens the door once again to colder air, and we're going to get these slaps of Arctic air probably into the pattern, especially as the NAO tanks into negative territory. But look at this here, Thursday, 3rd of October, long way out obviously, but you see the reasons behind why this would happen, given the MJO, given the NAO, the AO, etc., etc. But there's high pressure to the west, lower pressure to the east, and we've got that plunge of Arctic air. It may be short-lived slaps of cold, but nonetheless, we're seeing it anyway. So I think that's it. I think I've spoken long enough. I hope you've been able to stick with me throughout the video. Hope you've enjoyed the content. Hit that like button and subscribe, like I've said already, if you haven't already done so. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll try and look a little bit at the polar vortex in tomorrow's video, so stay tuned for that. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Bye for now.